They didn't whisper. That was the cruelest part of it all. I stood in the center of the clinic hallway, one hand resting instinctively over my stomach, while their voices drifted toward me. Sharp, amused, jagged. "Did you hear?" One hissed. "An Omega pregnant, but no mate. How shameless. I wonder which alpha used him and disappeared." Their laughter echoed louder than the frantic rhythm of my heartbeat. I kept my gaze fixed on the floor, pretending the words weren't slicing into me. In this city, a pregnancy was only celebrated when it came anchored to a bonded alpha. Someone wealthy, powerful, respectable. Anything else was treated as a stain on the fabric of society. An Omega without a mate was already pitted. An Omega carrying a child alone? A joke. A warning. A reminder of what happened when Omegas stepped out of line. The nurse finally called my name. Her eyes flicked briefly to my midsection, then away, as though even looking at me too long might ruin her reputation. "The test confirms it," she said, her voice flat and clinical. "You're in your 3rd month." I nodded. My throat felt as though it were filled with glass. I already knew. My body had been telling me for weeks. The lingering nausea, the exhaustion that seeped into my bones, the way my scent had changed. Softer, vulnerable, exposed. "You should notify the father," the nurse added, her emphasis deliberate. "I don't know who he is," I whispered. That wasn't a lie. The memory of that night still clung to my skin. The heat that came without warning. A scent that wasn't mine. Dark and commanding, like crushed cedar and rain-soaked earth. I never saw his face. I only remembered waking to an empty bed and surviving a night that should have been impossible. The council had built an entire legal system around the belief that an Omega could not conceive without a permanent bond. It was treated as biological law. So when my stomach began to swell, they didn't see a miracle. They saw a disgrace. I left the clinic with my chin tilted just high enough to keep the tears from falling. Outside, the towering skyscrapers felt like they were leaning in, suffocating me. Every alpha I passed felt dangerous. Every Omega's glance felt like a verdict. The silence at home was worse. My mother stopped meeting my eyes, her warmth replaced by a brittle disappointment that filled every room. A week later, the council elders summoned me. They offered no help, only warnings. No alpha would ever claim a child born of shame. Some suggested adoption. Others hinted at erasing the problem entirely. That night, as neon lights bled through my bedroom window, I felt it for the first time. A steady warmth. A soft, unmistakable flutter beneath my palm. My child. Unclaimed, perhaps, but alive. They could mock me until their voices grew hoarse. They could strip me of my family name and turn their backs in the street. I would not apologize for this life. Somewhere out there, an alpha existed who had left more than the scent of cedar behind. And if this city forced me to stand alone, then I would stand. For the sake of the heartbeat that already belonged to me. 2 days later, I was summoned again. The council chamber was a place of white marble and freezing silence. I stood alone at the center of the room, my boots scuffing softly against the polished floor, feeling the weight of 6 elders staring down from their elevated bench. They didn't see a person. They saw a miscalculation, an anomaly that threatened the carefully maintained purity of their social order. "The reports from the clinic are undisputed," the head elder began, his voice echoing like stones dropped into a well. "An unbonded pregnancy, a child with no alpha lineage to record." "He has a father," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "I just don't have his name." A ripple of disapproval moved through the chamber. To the council, a father without a name was a ghost. And a child sired by a ghost was a danger to the city's bloodline records. "Silence," the elder commanded. "We have deliberated. To allow you to remain would be to condone your behavior. We cannot have other Omegas believing they can bypass the laws of the bond. That path leads to disorder." He slid a heavy parchment across the stone table. It was not an offer of help. It was an eviction. "You are hereby stripped of your city residency," he continued. "You have 48 hours to collect your belongings and relocate to the outer districts." My heart dropped. The outer districts were nothing like the city. No advanced clinics. No patrols. No protections. Only those the city had deemed disposable. "You're throwing me out?" I whispered, one hand instinctively shielding my stomach. "In my condition? The child is a consequence of your choices," a female elder said coolly. "If you insist on keeping it, you will sustain it outside our jurisdiction. Unless," she paused, "you choose to surrender the child to the state upon birth for re-education and placement." "No." The word left my mouth before thought could catch it. "Never." The head elder rose, ending the hearing. "Then you will depart at dawn. May the Alpha you cannot name provide for you, because this city no longer will." The chamber doors groaned shut behind me as I walked out. The journey home felt like a funeral procession. When I reached our apartment, my suitcases were already waiting by the door. My mother stood in the kitchen with her back to me. She didn't turn around. She didn't ask where I would go. "The council sent a messenger," she said quietly. "They said if I let you stay, I lose my pension. I lose everything." "I understand," I replied, though the words felt hollow. I reached for her shoulder, but she flinched away, so I picked up my bags. They were heavy, dragging at my tired muscles, but they were all that remained of my life here. I didn't say goodbye. The apartment had already become a place of endings. At the city gates the next morning, the sun was just beginning to bleed over the horizon. The guards didn't meet my eyes. They checked my identification and stamped it with red ink. Unclaimed. I stepped onto the cracked road leading away from the lights. My shoes weren't made for the rough terrain, and my body ached with every step. But as the towering walls shrank behind me, a strange, terrifying sense of freedom settled in my chest. The world beyond the city was vast, cold, unforgiving. I was an Omega with nothing but a name I was losing and a life I was protecting. "I'll survive," I promised silently, glancing down at the faint curve of my belly, if only to prove them wrong. The wind rose, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant smoke, and for a fleeting second, I thought I caught it again, that ghost of crushed cedar and rain. A memory or a warning. Then the desert wind swallowed it whole. The transition from the city to the outer districts wasn't just a change in geography. It was a collapse of reality. Behind me, the silver spires of the capital glinted like needles beneath the sun. Beautiful, distant, untouchable. Ahead stretched the Fringe. A sprawl of rusted shipping containers, low concrete blocks, and broken streets that smelled of ozone and desperation. There were no neon lights here to soften the shadows. My feet throbbed inside my thin shoes. Every step felt like a toll paid to the gravel beneath me. I clutched the handles of my suitcases until my knuckles ached, trying to ignore the stares that followed me down the dusty roads. In the city, I had been a scandal. Here I was prey. I eventually found a place that called itself a boarding house, though it was little more than a repurposed warehouse divided by thin plywood walls. The air inside was heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies and cheap tobacco. "An Omega?" the landlord hissed, his eyes sliding over me. He was a beta with a face like crumpled parchment. His gaze paused at the subtle swell of my stomach. "And carrying too. One of the council's rejects, huh?" "I have credits," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I pulled out my digital wallet, the last of my savings glowing faintly. "I just need a room. With a lock." He grunted, snatching the payment before tossing a rusted key onto the counter. "Room 4B. Don't expect comfort. And keep your scent controlled. Alphas out here don't bother pretending to be civil." My room was a narrow box with a single window overlooking an alleyway. The cot creaked under the slightest movement. I sat on its edge, the silence pressing in until my ears rang. For the first time since leaving the clinic, the adrenaline drained away, leaving only a hollow, aching fear. I was 22. I was pregnant. I had nowhere left to go. From my pocket, I pulled out the crumpled ultrasound image I had hidden from my mother. Just a blur of gray, a faint spark of light suspended in darkness. I traced its edges with shaking fingers. "It's just us now," I whispered into the room. "But I promised you, I won't apologize for you." Hunger eventually drove me back onto the streets. I found a diner near the edge of the market, its windows clouded with years of grime. I ordered the cheapest soup and slid into a corner booth, my back pressed firmly to the wall. Halfway through the bowl, the air shifted. A group of alphas entered, their presence heavy, oppressive. They smelled of grease and iron, hard labor and short tempers. I pulled my coat tighter, instinctively trying to bury the sweetness of my scent beneath layers of worn fabric. One of them, broad with a jagged scar across his throat, paused near my table. He inhaled slowly, his nostrils flaring. "Smell that?" he chuckled, his voice low and rough. Something soft just wandered into the dirt. I didn't look up. My eyes stayed fixed on the soup, my heart pounding like a trapped animal. "Leave it, Jax," another alpha muttered as he headed for the counter. Council cast-offs aren't worth the trouble. They moved on, but the chill lingered long after they were gone. That was when I understood. Survival here wasn't just about food or shelter. I had to learn how to disappear. I had to become invisible in a world that hunted weakness by scent alone. That night, sleep refused to come. I shoved the heavy dresser in front of the door and lay on the cot, listening to distant sirens and shouting echo through the streets. The window pane rattled as the wind slipped through the cracks, cool against my skin. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the scent of cedar and rain, the only proof that the man who had changed my life was real. I wondered if he slept in silk sheets back in the city. I wondered if he even remembered the night he had taken something from me without ever knowing my name. "I don't need you," I lied to the darkness. But when sleep finally claimed me, my hand never left my stomach, guarding the only piece of him I had left. 5 years later. "Daddy, look, I found a shiny." The voice was small, bright, and the only thing that kept me anchored to this world. I glanced up from the laundry I was scrubbing to see Jason sprinting across the cracked pavement of our small courtyard. He was 5 years old, all restless energy, with messy dark hair and eyes far too perceptive for someone so young. He held up a jagged piece of blue glass, polished smooth by years of grit and neglect in the outer districts. "It's beautiful, Jace," I said, wiping my damp hands on my apron before ruffling his hair. "Just like a star." He grinned, and my heart stuttered. Every time he smiled, I saw a ghost. Jason didn't look like me. His jawline was already too strong, his gaze too steady, heavy in a way that didn't belong to a child. He was the living echo of a man I had only known in darkness. 5 years in the Fringe had changed me. The frightened Omega who had been cast out of the city no longer existed. In his place stood someone with calloused hands and a spine hardened by survival. I worked 2 jobs, scrubbing linens at the local clinic and sorting scrap at the yard, just to keep our one-room apartment warm and Jason's belly full. "Are we going to the market today?" Jason asked, slipping his treasure into a pocket I'd patched more times than I could count. "Only if you promise to stay close," I said, my tone sharpening. "The city traders are coming through. It'll be crowded." The outer districts had become a hub for gray market trade, wealthy alphas from the inner city slipping down to buy cheap labor and untraceable goods. It was the only place the 2 worlds touched, and it was never safe. As we walked toward the market square, I kept Jason's hand firmly locked in mine. He was an unclaimed child. No records, no protection. To the world, he was a mistake. To me, he was everything. The market was a storm of sound and movement. Heavy transport trucks hummed with expensive engines, towering over rusted carts and hand-built stalls. I smelled them before I saw them, the alphas from the city. Their scents were polished, expensive, confident. I lowered my head instinctively, the old habit of disappearing sliding back into place. "Daddy," Jason whispered suddenly, slowing to a stop. "It smells like trees." My body locked. "What did you say?" I asked carefully. "Trees," he repeated, nose wrinkling as he sniffed the air. "Like rain, like the park in your book." The world tilted. Through exhaust fumes and frying oil, a scent cut cleanly through the crowd. Sharp, familiar, crushed cedar and rain-soaked earth. My blood turned to ice. I didn't look up. Couldn't. I scooped Jason into my arms, his weight solid against my chest, and turned sharply toward a side alley. "We're going home, Jace," I said, already moving. "We'll come back another day." "But Daddy's Spider-Man," he protested. pointing over my shoulder toward the toy stall. Look! I didn't look. I ran. I moved through narrow alleys and broken paths, my heart pounding just as it had 5 years ago. My thoughts screamed over one another. It's impossible. He wouldn't be here. Not in the Fringe. Not near me. I didn't stop until I reached our door and slammed it shut, throwing the bolt into place. I pressed my back against the wood, gasping, while Jason stared up at me with wide, confused eyes. "Did I do something bad?" he asked softly, his bottom lip trembling. I dropped to my knees and pulled him into my arms, holding him too tight, burying my face against his neck. He smelled like soap and dust and sunshine. Not cedar. Not rain. "No, baby," I whispered, forcing my shaking hands to still. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just thought I saw a ghost." But even as I said it, I knew better. The city had tried to erase me. I had tried to forget the night that shattered my life. But the father of my child was no longer just a memory. He was close. And if Jason could smell him, then he could smell us too. The encounter at the market cracked something open inside me. As I sat on the floor of our cramped apartment, Jason clutched against my chest. The peeling wallpaper and distant sirens slowly faded from my awareness. The present loosened its grip, and the vault I had kept sealed for 5 years finally gave way. The sight of that black car, the weight of that presence, that familiar, crushing scent, it dragged me backward. Straight into the night everything changed. It was the week of the Great Lunar Festival, back when I still believed the city was a place where dreams survived. I had been working as a server at a high-end gala held on the rooftop garden of the Grand Plaza Mall. The air had been thick with expensive champagne and layered with the cloying perfume of the elite. I shouldn't have been there. I was an unbonded omega on suppressants, but exhaustion had worn my defenses thin. Double shifts, missed doses. My body rebelled. The heat didn't arrive gently. It struck like a physical blow. One moment I was balancing a tray. The next my vision blurred and my skin burned beneath my uniform. Hunger and panic twisted together as I stumbled away from the lights, my own clothes feeling like restraints. I pushed through a pair of heavy glass doors and onto the terrace, desperate for cold air. The night was crisp, but it did nothing to soothe the fever roaring through my blood. I collapsed against a marble pillar, breath tearing from my lungs in broken gasps. And then, the world stopped. A shadow fell over me, tall, solid, overwhelming. I never saw his face. The moon was behind him, turning him into a figure carved from darkness and silver light. But I smelled him, and the scent didn't belong in a city drowned in artificial fragrances. It was primal, crushed cedar and rain-soaked earth. "Help me," I whispered. It wasn't a decision. It was instinct. I remembered his hands, large, steady, spanning my waist with a possessiveness that made something deep inside me surrender. He didn't speak, but the growl that rumbled from his chest vibrated through my bones, promising danger and safety all at once. For one night, the laws of the council ceased to exist. Alpha and Omega weren't ranks or rules. They were gravity, balance, two forces locking into place. He held me as though I were the only thing in the world that mattered, his touch burning hotter than the fever consuming me. Hidden in the darkness of the terrace, far from judging eyes, he claimed my senses completely. But morning was cruel. I woke as the sun bled across the skyline. The terrace was empty. The silk jacket he'd wrapped around me was gone. There was no name, no contact, only the fading ghost of cedar on my skin, and an ache in my chest that never truly left. I waited. For a month I walked past that mall every day. I searched every crowd for those shoulders, every street for that presence. I breathed in the air, hoping for rain and wood. There was nothing. He vanished back into the upper levels of the city, leaving me to face the council, the whispers, and the slow, undeniable swell of my stomach alone. "Daddy!" Jason's small hand touched my cheek, pulling me back into the present. I blinked, realizing my face was wet. "I'm okay, Jace," I whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "I was just thinking about a long time ago." I looked at my son. His jaw, his eyes, the quiet steadiness in the way he carried himself even at 5 years old. He was a living map of that night. And if the man from my memories was truly in the Fringe now, he wasn't just a ghost anymore. He was a threat. Because if an alpha like that discovered his blood ran through the veins of a so-called disgrace in the outer districts, he wouldn't just break my heart again. He would take my son. I spent the day like a ghost haunting my own home. I didn't take Jason to the market. I didn't even let him play in the courtyard. Every time a car engine rumbled in the distance, I froze by the door, holding my breath until the sound passed. I told myself I was being paranoid. The Fringe was massive. The chances of that alpha finding this crumbling boarding house were astronomical. Then, late in the afternoon, heavy boots thudded down the hallway. Then a knock. "Room for B!" The landlord barked through the thin plywood. "Open up. I've got a buyer checking the wing." My chest nodded. I'm not dressed," I lied, scrambling for Jason. He was sitting on the floor, playing with his blue glass star. He looked up at me, head tilted in innocent curiosity. I dragged a worn hoodie over my head, trying futilely to mask my scent. It was already too late. The door swung open, and it felt like the air itself vanished. The landlord stepped in first, looking smaller and more ridiculous than ever. But the man behind him, everything inside me froze. He had to duck slightly to clear the doorway. A dark, tailored suit clung to a frame built for violence, not boardrooms. He filled the room, as if the walls bowed to his presence. And then the scent hit me, crushed cedar and rain-soaked earth. It wasn't memory. It was real. He was here. I pressed my back against the sink, gripping the edge until porcelain bit into my palms. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "Why are you slow?" the landlord snapped. "You want me to lose investors?" The alpha's gaze swept the room. The peeling walls, the single cot, the small pile of Jason's toys, with cold, calculating precision. Then his eyes landed on me. His pupils flared. His nostrils flexed as he drew in my scent. No words, no greeting, just recognition. "As I was saying, Mr. Thorne," the landlord babbled, oblivious, "the foundations are solid. With a little investment, this block. Leave us." The alpha's voice was low, melodic, and dangerous. It vibrated through my chest like a memory I had never escaped. "But sir, I haven't. Now." The landlord didn't argue. He scrambled out, muttering, and slammed the door shut. Silence fell. Jason shifted in my arms, sensing the tension. The alpha took a single step closer and stopped. His gaze softened. Not for me, for Jason. His nostrils flared again, sharper this time, as if confirming something he already knew. "You're..." His voice dropped. "You're his." I froze. Jason tugged at my hoodie. "Daddy, who is he?" "No one you need to worry about," I said quickly, pulling him closer. The alpha looked at me then, really looked at me, and something flickered across his face. Shock, relief, and something dangerously close to hunger. "So you're alive," he murmured. "All this time, you were alive." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said flatly, shifting so my body shielded Jason. "You've seen the room. You're done here." He didn't move. "You know exactly what I'm talking about." His voice was quiet, but it carried enough weight to bend the air. "And this boy..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. He inhaled. Jason's small fingers clenched into my jeans. "Daddy?" he whispered. "Why is the tall man looking at me?" The word daddy hit the room like a blow. I saw Thorne's jaw tighten. His eyes snapped back to mine, dark with sudden clarity. "He smells like me," he said. "He has my eyes." It wasn't a question. "He has my life." I shot back, cold fury cutting through my fear. "And we've been fine for 5 years. We don't need an investor telling us who we belong to." Thorne's gaze swept the room again. The bed we shared, the cold stove, the damp corners. "You call this fine? It's ours," I snapped. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. He looked like a man holding himself back from crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. "I'm staying at the Central Hotel," he said at last, steel returning to his tone. His eyes never left Jason. "I'll be back in the morning." My blood ran cold. "Don't think about moving," he added. "I'll have men at the exits of this block. Tomorrow we talk." Then he turned and left. The door closed, and the room felt impossibly empty. I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I stood there, staring at the door, while Jason looked up at me with wide, confused eyes. "Is he a friend, Daddy?" I looked down at my son, the only truth born from a night of shadows. I didn't sleep. I spent the night sitting in the wooden chair by the window, watching the street below. Thorne hadn't been lying. 2 black SUVs idled at the mouth of the alley, their headlights cutting through the dusty dark like the unblinking eyes of predators. I had thought about the fire escape, about the back basement exit, about running, but I knew it was useless. You don't outrun a man like Thorne in a place with only one way in and one way out. Jason slept fitfully on the cot, stirring every time a truck rumbled past or a siren wailed in the distance. Each time his small body twitched, my chest tightened painfully. I watched the Fringe through the cracked window, the sickly yellow glow of old street lamps that never quite chased the shadows away. At exactly 7 a.m., the knock came. It wasn't like the landlord's pounding. It was quiet, measured. 3 deliberate taps. My body moved before my mind caught up. I positioned myself between the door and Jason just as he sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I opened the door. Thorne stood in the hallway, but the man from yesterday was gone. The expensive suit was replaced with dark trousers and a simple shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. His hair was slightly disheveled, and shadows bruised the skin beneath his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, or rested, or stopped fighting. The scent of cedar was still there, still overwhelming, but now it was layered with exhaustion, bitter coffee, and something raw, something aching. His gaze went past me immediately, seeking for Jason. When he saw him, something in his face fractured. For a single, unguarded second, the alpha composure, the steel and control fell away. What remained was a wound so deep it stole my breath. Then his eyes met mine. "May I come in?" he asked quietly, his voice rough, like it hadn't been used in hours. I didn't move. "You said you'd be back. You didn't say I had to let you in." "I know." He didn't push. He simply stood there, filling the doorway while somehow making himself smaller. "We need to talk." "You can talk from there," I said. He nodded once. "Fair." A pause. "I owe you a name." I said nothing. I just stared at him. "My name is Marcus Thorne," he continued softly, "and I owe you 5 years of explanations." Jason peeked around my leg. "Your name is Marcus?" Marcus's entire attention shifted to him, his expression softening in a way that made my chest ache. "Yes, and you're Jason." Jason frowned. "How do you know?" "Your daddy told me." His eyes flicked to mine, silently asking permission for the lie. I gave him nothing. Jason hesitated, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are you taking us away?" Marcus lowered himself to his knees right there in the filthy hallway, bringing himself eye level with my son. The sight of such a powerful alpha kneeling on cracked tile nearly undid me. "I would like to," he said carefully. "There's a place that's warm, with real beds, windows that aren't broken, but only if your daddy says it's okay." Jason looked up at me, trusting me to decide. My lungs burned. The defiance I'd prepared, the accusations, the anger, crumbled in my throat. "Say what you came to say," I managed. Marcus rose slowly. "Alone? Or?" His eyes flicked to Jason. "Jason," I said gently, "go play with your blocks at corner for a minute. Okay?" He obeyed, though he kept watching us from the corner. Marcus stepped inside and closed the door, leaning against it as if blocking every possible escape, including his own. "The Grand Plaza," he began quietly. "5 years ago, you wore a server's uniform that was too big in the shoulders. You dropped a tray of champagne flutes near the fountain." I froze. "I saw you before the heat hit," he continued. "I watched you for an hour. You smiled at guests who barely noticed you. You hid a yawn behind your hand when you thought no one was looking." My mouth went dry. "You watched me?" "I was supposed to be closing a merger that night," Contracts. Numbers. He exhaled sharply. Then I caught your scent. Jasmine and night air. And everything else stopped. His voice lowered. When I saw you stumble onto the terrace, I followed. What happened between us wasn't planned. But it wasn't a mistake either. Every instinct in me knew you were. He cut himself off, shaking his head. I was called away before dawn. An emergency board meeting across the city. A deal that would collapse if I wasn't there to sign. I made the most arrogant, stupid assumption of my life. His voice cracked. I thought I'd find you easily. You worked there. How hard could it find beautiful Omega with eyes like a storm? He let out a simple bitter laugh, directed only at himself. I went back that afternoon. You were gone. The company said you'd left. No forwarding information. No name. Just Omega Server B12. He met my eyes. I used every resource I had. Investigators. Databases. Scent trackers. Nothing. It was like the city swallowed you whole. He took a step toward me, then stopped. Then I heard rumors. An Omega, pregnant, exiled to the Fringe. The description was vague, but something in my chest knew. I've been coming here for months, buying up properties, funding clinics, all while searching every face in the crowds for yours. His eyes drifted to Jason, who was stacking blocks quietly. And then yesterday, in the market, I smelled it. Not just Jasmine. Jasmine and me. A piece of my own soul. The truth landed in the space between us, heavy and fragile. I didn't abandon you, he whispered. I lost you, and I've spent every day since trying to find my way back. Silence filled the room, broken only by the soft click of Jason's blocks. So what now? I asked quietly. You found us. What do you want? Marcus crossed the distance slowly, giving me every chance to retreat. I didn't. I want to keep you safe, he said. I want Jason to have a childhood that isn't built on survival. And I want the chance to know the man who raised our son alone in this place. His hand lifted, hovering near my cheek without touching. The strongest person I've ever known. The council can't touch you under my protection, he said firmly. No one will ever call you unclaimed again. Jason patted over and slipped his hand into mine. Daddy? He asked softly. Is it like an adventure? That broke me. I knelt in front of him. How would you feel about going somewhere new? Somewhere warm? He thought for a moment. Will you be there? Always. Then okay. I stood and faced Marcus. We'll need to pack. The relief on his face was immediate and overwhelming. I'll wait outside, he said. Take your time. At the door, he paused. Thank you. When he left, I sank onto the cot, Jason climbing into my lap. He's tall, Jason murmured. Yes. And he smells like outside. Yes. Are we really leaving? I looked around the room that had kept us alive, but never safe. Yes, baby, I whispered. We're really leaving. Leaving the room that had been our entire world felt less like an escape and more like a surrender to a different kind of gravity. Marcus didn't rush us. He waited in the hallway, a silent, broad-shouldered sentry, while I zipped the single bag that held our lives. Jason insisted on carrying his own small backpack, the one with the patched star on the front. His tiny face solemn beneath the weight of the unknown. When I opened the door, Marcus didn't smile. His expression was one of focused intensity, as if he were handling something infinitely fragile. He nodded once, reached for my bag, and waited. After a beat, I let the strap slide from my shoulder. His fingers brushed mine. The jolt was immediate, half memory, half electricity, shooting up my arm. The car is downstairs, he said quietly. We walked through the boarding house for the last time. The landlord was nowhere to be seen. Doors cracked open as we passed, wary eyes following us down the hall, whispers clinging to the walls. I didn't look back. The drive to the city passed in silence, broken only by Jason's soft gasps as we crossed into the inner district. Neon gateways rose around us, towering and alive. He pressed his face to the cool glass, watching the world shift from gray dust to shimmering light. Marcus sat in the front seat, giving us space, but his presence anchored the car, heavy and constant. I felt his attention every time I moved, careful and restrained. We didn't stop at a sleek downtown tower. Instead, the SUV wound into a quiet, green-lined district where ancient trees arched over the road and homes sat hidden behind high stone walls. Wrought iron gates opened soundlessly, and the car rolled onto a gravel drive. The house wasn't a cold monument of glass and steel. It was stone and timber, warm, solid, real. Jason climbed out beside me, his mouth falling open. "Is this a castle, Daddy?" "It's a home," Marcus said gently, though his eyes were on me when he spoke. "Your home." Inside, an older beta woman greeted us, her kind eyes soft as they took us in. The air smelled of lemon polish and wood smoke. The house was richly furnished but lived in. Deep couches, shelves heavy with books, a wide rug before a stone fireplace. No sterile white, no sharp edges. Felt like shelter. But it was the back of the house that stole my breath. Floor-to-ceiling glass doors opened onto a walled garden. Even in late winter, it was alive. Ivy climbing stone walls, evergreens tucked beneath bare branches, a willow draping itself over a stone bench. Private world. Safe. Growing. "Your rooms are upstairs," Marcus said, his voice low and careful. "They're connected. Jason's has a window seat overlooking the garden. Yours," he hesitated, "has a lock on the door." My gaze snapped to his. "It's for your peace of mind," he said steadily. "Not to keep you in, but to make you feel safe enough to come out. When you're ready." He had thought of everything. Jason's safety. My autonomy. Upstairs, the rooms were bright and airy. Jason's held a race car bed, shelves already stocked with books and soft toys. Mine was quieter, a wide bed layered in thick duvets, an armchair by the fireplace, doors opening onto a private balcony. And just as promised, a solid bolt on the inside of the door. It was too much, too kind, like stepping into a dream I didn't trust myself to believe. Later, after a bath that felt like washing 5 years of grit from my bones, I found Marcus in the study. He stood by the window, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, watching the garden darken beneath the stars. "He's asleep," I said softly. "Didn't even make it through the first story." Marcus turned. In the lamplight, he looked younger, softer, the relentless alpha edge dulled by something like awe. "He feels safe," he said. Not a question. He stepped closer. "You owe me nothing," he said quietly. "Not explanations, not affection, not time. The only thing I ask is that you let me provide this for him. And for you." The sincerity struck harder than dominance ever could. "Why?" The word slipped out, bare and aching. "You could have taken him. The council would have handed him over without question. Why do this instead?" Pain flickered across his face. "Is that what you think of me?" he asked softly. "That I take." He shook his head. "I searched for a ghost for 5 years. Now I found a man braver than any warrior. And a boy who is my heart walking outside my body. I don't want to seize. I want to build. However long it takes. However much you'll allow." I had no armor left. I looked past him, through the glass, to the moonlit garden. A protected place meant for growth. "I know I said you don't have to explain anything," Marcus said gently, "but there's one thing I want to ask." I turned back to him. "What is it?" "What's your name?" he said. I never got the chance to ask. "What's the name of the man who gave me a son?" My voice was low when I answered. "Kiran." "Kiran," he repeated like a promise. The name hung in the air between us. A shared secret. A key turned in a lock that had been sealed for 5 years. Marcus didn't move. He let the sound of it settle, his gaze holding mine with an intensity that felt less like possession and more like recognition. Like he was finally putting a name to the face that had haunted his dreams. "Kiran," he said again, softer this time. A verification. A vow. He didn't push for more. He simply nodded, as if filing the information away in a sacred part of himself, and gestured toward the hall. "You should rest. It's been a day." It had been more than a day. It had been an epic. Upstairs, I checked on Jason. He was a small, warm lump beneath the duvet, one hand curled under his cheek, breathing deep and even. The tension that usually pinched his brow in sleep was gone. He looked, for the first time I could remember, utterly at peace. I brushed the hair from his forehead and felt a lump form in my throat. Then I went to my room. I didn't bolt the door. I left it slightly ajar. A silent testament to a trust one wasn't sure I felt yet, but wanted to test. The bed was a cloud of softness, a stark contrast to the thin, lumpy cot I was used to. I sank into it, expecting the silence to feel heavy, alien. Instead, I slept, deeply, dreamlessly. I woke to sunlight streaming through the balcony doors and the sound of laughter. Not Jason's high, bright giggle. A lower, richer sound. A rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. I pulled on a robe and followed it downstairs to the kitchen. The scene that greeted me was so disarmingly normal it felt surreal. Marcus, in a simple gray sweater and dark trousers, stood at the large kitchen island. Jason was perched on a stool beside him, clad in soft blue pajamas, his hair a wild mess. They were surrounded by the catastrophic, beautiful evidence of pancake making. A bowl of batter, a whisk dripping onto the counter, a dusting of flour like first snow. But you have to wait for the bubbles. Marcus was explaining, his voice patient. He held the spatula, but his hand hovered, letting Jason decide. Now, Jason declared. Marcus flipped the pancake with a smooth twist of his wrist. It landed perfectly, golden brown. Good call, Captain. Jason beamed. A smile so wide and unguarded it made my heart clench. He spotted me then. Daddy, Marcus is making spaceship pancakes. Look. He pointed to a plate where a stack sat, some vaguely resembling rockets and stars. Marcus turned. His eyes met mine, and a different kind of warmth entered them, softer than the heat from the stove. Morning. Coffee's on the counter. Hope you don't mind the invasion of your kitchen. Your kitchen. The words were casual, but the intent was clear. This was my space to claim. I don't mind, I said, my voice still rough with sleep. I poured a cup of coffee, the rich aroma a luxury I'd long forgotten. We ate at the sun-drenched table in the nook, Jason chattering between bites about the garden and the race car bed. Marcus listened, nodding, asking simple questions that kept the stream of words flowing. He didn't try to dominate the conversation. He just existed with us. A quiet, steady presence. After breakfast, Clara, the older woman who had welcomed us the night before, appeared with gentle efficiency and whisked Jason away to get dressed, promising a trip to the greenhouse to see the tiny oranges. Silence fell. Comfortable. Charged. He's amazing, Marcus said, staring at the place where Jason had been sitting. The awe in his voice was naked, humbling. His mind. The way he sees things. He's had to be observant, I said, the old defensiveness rising. It was a survival skill. Marcus's gaze snapped to me, pained. I know, and I will spend every day trying to make sure he never has to use that skill again. For that reason. He pushed his plate away. I have to go into the office today. A few meetings I can't reschedule. But I wanted to ask, would it be all right if we have dinner together? Nothing fancy. Just dinner. Here in the dining room. So we can talk. Without the weight of the last 5 years hanging over every word. It was a request, not a demand. An alpha asking an omega for permission. Okay, I said. We'll be here. He stood, and for a moment it looked like he wanted to say more. Instead, he only nodded. Thank you, Kiran. I spent the day exploring the house with Jason, learning its rhythms. It was a home built for living, not for show. There was a library with a rolling ladder, a music room with a grand piano gathering dust, a sunroom filled with plants. Everywhere, signs of a life lived alone but fully. Books left open on armrests, a chess game frozen mid-play on a side table. It was the study that gave him away. On the mantel, among a few tasteful artifacts, lay a small, smooth river stone. Beside it, pressed into a simple frame, was a dried sprig of jasmine. My breath caught. It was a foolish, sentimental thing, the kind of relic you keep when all you have left is a memory of a scent. He really had been looking. He really had been remembering. That evening, I dressed in the soft, new clothes, nothing flashy, just well-made trousers and a sweater. Jason wore a tiny button-down shirt, utterly delighted by the idea of a fancy dinner. The dining room glowed with candlelight, the table set for three with simple elegance. Marcus arrived just as Clara brought out the first course, a fragrant soup. He changed into dark trousers and a white shirt, the sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a corporate titan and more like a man coming home. Dinner was easy. Marcus asked Jason about the greenhouse, listened with genuine interest to his detailed report on the baby oranges. He asked me gentle, open-ended questions about my interests from before, what I'd read, what music I'd loved. He was reconstructing the person I'd been, the one the Fringe hadn't managed to erase. When Jason's head began to nod, Clara swept him off to bed, leaving Marcus and me alone with a pot of tea and flickering candlelight. The silence now was different, full of all the things we hadn't said. "Thank you for today," I said finally. "For the pancakes. For all of it." "You don't have to thank me," he replied, pouring tea for us both. "It's the bare minimum of what you deserve." He hesitated, then added quietly, "I saw you in the study today." My cheeks warmed. "The jasmine. A reminder," he said, "to never stop looking." He stirred his tea, the spoon clinking softly. "I want to know everything, Kiran. The good and the bad. The nights you were scared. The moments Jason made you laugh. I want the years I missed, but only if you want to give them to me." It was an offering, a chance to weave him into our history, thread by painful thread. I took a shaky breath. "It wasn't all bad," I began. "When he first learned to laugh, it sounded like bells. It lit up the whole damn Fringe." Marcus's eyes glistened in the candlelight. He reached across the table, not for my hand, but to nudge the sugar bowl toward me. A silent, tender gesture. "Tell me," he said, his voice thick. "Tell me about the bells." And so, in the warm circle of light, I began to spin the first thread of our shared story. Not with the pain of the beginning, but with a single perfect moment of joy. And he listened as if it were the most precious confession in the world. 3 days passed in a quiet, surreal rhythm. We were learning the shape of each other. The sound of Marcus's footsteps in the hall at dawn. The way Jason's laughter echoed differently against these high ceilings. My own reflection in the polished banister. Less gaunt, less hunted. I was in the walled garden with Jason, the late morning sun pale but hopeful. He was crouched by the stone bench, whispering secrets to a ladybug crawling on the ivy. I sat on the steps, a blanket over my knees, watching him exist in a state of pure, safe curiosity. It was a gift I was still learning how to receive. Inside, Marcus was on a video call, his low voice a distant rumble through the open French doors. The peace shattered with a single melodic chime, the iron gates at the front of the property. My body knew before my mind caught up. It went rigid, a cold wave of dread washing from my scalp to my heels. No one we knew used the front gates. Deliveries went to the service entrance. Jason looked up, sensing my fear. "Daddy." "Stay right there, Jace." My voice was calm, a practiced lie. I stood as a sleek, black vehicle with the council's insignia. A silver helix encircled by laurels, slid to a stop on the gravel. The door opened, and a man in the crisp gray uniform of a council messenger stepped out. His eyes scanned the garden, impersonal and assessing, before landing on me. Marcus was already striding out of the house, his phone discarded, his expression a mask of controlled storm. He reached my side just as the messenger approached the low garden wall. "Kiran," the man said, his tone devoid of inflection. He didn't greet Marcus, didn't acknowledge his presence. The council recognized only its own authority. "You are formally summoned." He held out a thin, slate-gray tablet. The screen glowed with cold, official text. My fingers were numb as I took it. Council summons. Mandatory attendance. To Kiran. Reason. Reevaluation of exile status. And paternity verification. Legal reference. Article 7, Section 3. Revocation of exile conditional upon alpha sponsorship and bond formalization. Instructions. You are required to appear in person. Failure to comply may result in Forfeiture of all reinstatement rights. Potential custody review of minor. Additional notes. This summons is issued under the authority of the Council. Your attendance is mandatory. Any questions or delays will be noted as noncompliance. The words blurred. Custody review. They'd spelled it out. They weren't just calling me back. They were threatening the one thing I could not lose. Under what specific authority? Marcus asked. His voice was too quiet, too even. It was the sound of a steel door sliding shut. The child's existence alters the prior ruling, the messenger recited. The Council must determine if the original conditions of exile have been nullified by newly surfaced alpha involvement. His gaze flickered to Marcus, the only admission that he saw him at all. Jason had crept to my side, pressing against my leg. I put a hand on his head, a silent reassurance I did not feel. They want to see me, I said, my own voice sounding distant, to see if I'm still manageable. They don't get to see you alone, Marcus stated, his eyes never leaving the messenger. The child remains here. The summons is for the Omega and the minor, the messenger insisted, though he took a subtle step back under the weight of Marcus's gaze. The child, Marcus repeated, the word leaving his mouth like a law, is under my protection. He is not stepping foot in that chamber. Is that understood? The messenger hesitated, then gave a tight nod. The Council might be powerful, but even they calculated the risk of provoking an alpha of Thorne's standing. You will be escorted tomorrow at 9, the messenger said, retreating toward his vehicle. Prepare accordingly. The gates closed behind him, leaving a silence that rang louder than the chime. Marcus turned to me. The storm in his eyes had banked, replaced by a fierce, protective resolve. They're not welcoming you back. They're testing a hypothesis, whether attaching yourself to me makes you more of a threat or something they can now control. And if they decide I'm a threat? The old fear, cold and familiar, coiled in my stomach. He cupped my face, his touch grounding, his scent of cedar wrapping around me like a shield. Then they will learn that the greatest threat to their order is not an Omega who defied them, but an Alpha who will burn their marble halls to the ground before he lets them touch what's his. He paused, his thumb stroking my cheek. What's ours? He didn't say don't be afraid. He promised consequences. The council chamber hadn't changed. It still smelled of ozone, polished marble, and cold judgment. The same high vaulted ceiling, the same elevated bench where 6 elders sat like carved idols. The air itself felt heavy, designed to press the breath from your lungs and the spirit from your bones. 5 years ago, I had stood in the center of this room alone, my hands empty, my future being carved away. Today I was not alone. Marcus walked beside me, his stride sure, his presence a palpable force that altered the very atmosphere of the room. He wore a tailored black suit, every line of it speaking of power, but his hand was at the small of my back. A steady, warm pressure. A reminder. I am here. Jason was safe at home with Clara, far from this place of cold echoes. The elders stared down. I recognized some of them. The head elder, his face a network of severe lines. The female elder who had suggested I surrender my child. Their eyes held no surprise, only calculation. Kiran, the head elder began, bypassing any preamble. Your exile was decreed due to a violation of biological and social law. You have now returned, accompanied by Alpha Thorne, who alleges paternal claim to the child in question. It is not an allegation, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the formal air. It is a fact, verified by my own genetic audit. A fact that does not erase the initial transgression. The female elder, Livia, interjected. An unbonded conception remains a stain. Your association with Alpha Thorne presents an opportunity for remediation. She leaned forward. The law is clear. For the exile to be revoked and the child's status legitimized, a formal bond must be established. The Omega must be claimed. The old words, the old trap. Claimed, bonded, legitimized. They wanted to reduce everything to a mark, a transaction, a way to file us away in their proper categories. My heart hammered, but not with fear, with a rising, defiant fire. Before I could speak, Marcus did. You misunderstand, he said, and his tone was so courteous it was more insulting than a shout. I am not here to seek your permission to claim what is already mine. I am here to inform you that your jurisdiction over him, and over my son, ends now. A stunned silence. You would defy council law? The head elder hissed. I am redefining it, Marcus replied, his gaze sweeping over them. You exiled him for surviving, for bringing a beautiful, intelligent life into this world alone. Your law offered him nothing but shame and hunger. My only role is to spend the rest of my life making up for the fact that I wasn't there to shield him from your version of justice. He turned then, fully facing me, blocking out the council, making the vast chamber feel as intimate as our garden. His eyes, fierce and tender, held only me. Kiran, he said, for everyone to hear. I don't need your submission. I don't want a bond that feels like a cage or a brand of ownership. The only thing I want from you is what you choose to give me. Every day, your trust, your voice, your hand in mine. He reached out, palm up, an offering, a question. The chamber was utterly still. The elders were statues, their power crumbling in the face of a simple, profound choice. I looked at his hand. I remembered the fringe, the cold, the fear. I remembered Jason's laugh in the sunshine yesterday. I placed my hand in his. I choose you, I said, and my voice did not waver. It echoed. Not because a law demands it, because I do. Marcus's fingers closed around mine, warm and sure. He looked back at the council, our joined hands lifted slightly between us. A united front. The exile, he stated, is over. By my authority. By his choice. Any further contact will be considered a direct challenge to my family. And I do not lose challenges. He didn't wait for a dismissal. He turned, and with my hand firmly in his, he led me out of the cold marble tomb and back toward the light. We didn't speak until the heavy doors groaned shut behind us, sealing away the silence of the council. The morning air outside was crisp, clean. Marcus stopped on the steps, lifting our joined hands. He pressed his lips to my knuckles, a kiss that was both a seal and a beginning. Let's go home, he said. Our son is waiting. And for the first time, the word home didn't mean a room in the fringe or a house in the city. It meant the space between our linked hands. It meant the future, uncharted and finally, blessedly, ours.